Hello and welcome to our second session on this modifiers, and in this session we are going to have a look at all the modifiers available in Blender 4.3 under the generative group. So to begin with, I will come into Blender and you have the default cube here, and selecting it I will come into the modifier here, and in the add modifier, so you can see various groups here: edit, generate, deform, normals, physics and hair. And I am now going to start with this generate group, and in the generate group the very first one we have here is the array. Now when I click on this array, then immediately you can see what happens is whatever object I have selected, the object is duplicated and placed next to the existing object, and the direction and the number of duplication can be controlled here. The very first parameter here is the count. As I increase the count, you can see that I have 5 replications here. And the second thing is, below that you have relative offset, and right now the duplication is happening along the x axis. Now if I make x 0, now all the 5 duplications are at the same place, and if I add, say for example 1.2 along y, you can now see a 20% gap between every duplication, because relative offset means offset happens. 1 means it is equivalent to the size of my cube. Now similarly, now if I just make z also 1.2, you can now see it is moving both along x and y axis, and you have this diagonal duplication happening like this. So now I will close this relative offset, I will switch it off, and next you have the constant offset. And in case of constant offset, if I open it, along the x it is now moving by 1 meter, but if I type 2 meters it will move by 2 meters, and if I type 3 meters, every duplicate will move by a specific distance of 3 meters, and this is what we call as the constant offset. But here the most interesting part over here is in the object offset. Now in this case, if I move it along x 3 meters and if I move it along y 3 meters, you can now see that I have got this diagonal replication. If I come into object offset, if I open this, I will close this constant offset. For this object offset, I need a reference object, and for this I will press Shift A, and in the empty I am now going to add a plane axis. I will open this add empty, and I will increase the size of my plane axis to see it here. Then I will come back into my cube and I will come into object offset, and I am going to select my empty. Now selecting the empty, numpad 7, come into the top view, and I will select this cube. I am going to press tab and I will press GY and move it to the top like this. So in edit mode I have moved my cube over here, and the origin point is here. Now I will press tab and come back, and now I will select this, and say for example I will select this cube, press tab, press SX, and I will scale it down and make it like a small band like this. So I will make it a small band like this. Say for example I want to create a clock and I want 12 pieces of it. Then I am going to use my calculator. See, now for example one rotation is 360 degree divided by 12 is equal to 30 degree. So now if I select this empty, I will press N, and here in the item, if I come into rotation and along Z rotation, if I rotate it by 30 degree, you can immediately see that I have 5 copies and it is exactly divided by 30 degree. Now I will select this cube, and in the number of counts if I make it 12, now you can see that I have this clock structure. Now say for example I will zoom in and I will select this tab, press tab and then come over here and say for example I will select this and say press Ctrl R and I will add a few loop cut like this, right click and then I am going to create some kind of shape here. Say I will press 7, come into the front view. I will now enable wireframe mode and I will see this X-ray toggle is on. I will select these 2 points and I will enable this proportional editing, press S and I am going to change the influence area and I am going to scale it up like this. So I will just create a curved structure like this and I will select these 2 points, press SX and I will scale it down like this and I will reduce the influence area and I am going to create some peculiar shape like this. I will now press tab and now I have a structure like this. Press Z and come into the solid mode and now if I come in the top view and if I come into the modifier and if I increase this count to say for example 30 and then I will select this empty and set its rotation to about 6 degree. Now you can see that I got a structure like this. I will select this cube and if I increase the count to around 60, I got one full circle wheel like this. I will press numpad 7, tab, I will come into wireframe mode, I will select all these vertices, see that all the vertices are selected, then I will press rotate Z 180 degree and if I press enter and now you can see if I press Z and come into solid mode, you can now see I have some structure like a gear wheel. Now I will come into file and I am going to click save as and here in my modifiers folder I am going to name this as 04_02 gear wheel and I am now going to save. We have explored our first modifier which is the array modifier. Now for the next thing I will come into the file new general and the next modifier that we are going to study is the bevel. So I will select this cube, I will come into modifier and now I am going to add the modifier bevel. So when I add the bevel modifier here, the very first option I have is the vertex and the edges. So here what happens is all the edges here will actually be converted into a 45 degree plane like this and the width of this beveled edge is determined by this width type which is set to offset now and it is set to 0.1 and if I increase this and change this you can see the variation happening. Now instead of the edges if I choose vertices, only the vertices will now be affected. Now the next thing over here is I will switch it back to edges. In the width type apart from offset I have width and in case of width I can specifically give the exact width here. Say for example if I need 1 meter of width, see this bevel will happen for 1 meter. So that can be specified here. And the third option you have is the depth, means the complete depth of this edge will be executed and you are seeing this kind of rhombus shape generated by a cube. Then apart from depth I have here the percentage where I can bevel this exactly by 10%. And the final one here I have is absolute and this is also going to generate this rhombus shape. So now I will come back here and set it back to offset and I will set this offset value to around 0.3 and then now you can see that these edges are flat. If I want a curved edge, I can come here and increase the number of segments to create this curve like this. So now I have got the curvature and the other option I have here is the limit method. either I can limit it by angle or weight. Now what is this weight is, say for example when I am applying the bevel, I want different amount of bevels on different edges. Then what I can do is I will press tab and say for example I will come into edge select mode and I am going to select one edge. I will press 1 and I will select one edge at the bottom like this, and I will press Ctrl E and I am going to select edge bevel weight, and I am going to drag this and then come into this window and I will set this factor to around 1. Now after this I am going to now select another edge over here. I will press Ctrl E and I will come into edge bevel weight. Now for example this edge bevel weight, either I can control it here or I can press N, and here in the item you can now see you have bevel weight present over here, and I can set the value here. Say for example I will set this value to around 0.5. So I have one edge here set to weight 1 and another one set to 0.5. Now I will come into this bevel, I will press tab and come into object mode, and now I will select the cube, and here in the limit type I am going to now select the weight, and then say for example I will come here and I will set this to a width of around 1 meter and I will set the segment to 1, and you can now see here the edge which has one weight has 1 meter of bevel, whereas the edge that has weight 0.5 has exactly half of the bevel applied. So like this you can apply different amount of bevel to different edges by adjusting the weight. Now apart from this, I will come over here and I will delete this bevel. Now I will select this, come into 1 and come into front view, press numpad 1 and come into the front view. Now I will press tab, and in the edit mode I am going to come into vertex edit mode and I will select the 4 vertices on the top. So I have selected only these 4 vertices, and then I will come into the data modifier and I am going to create a new group and I am going to call this as top edges, and I will choose assign with the weight value of 1. Then I am now going to press tab, and now coming into object mode in modifier, now if I come to generate bevel and if I apply a bevel of around say 0.5 value, and if I come to limit method and this time I will choose vertex group and I am going to select top edges. So now you can see that the bevel is applied only to this particular vertex group. The other thing you have here is the profile, and in profile you can see the shape value is set to 0.5. Say I will increase this to around say 5. So I have added 5 segments and I have created this. I am next going to add one more bevel to this, and this time I am going to apply bevel. I will press tab and I am going to select only this one edge, and I have already set this edge value to, so if you come over here I will set its bevel weight value here to 1, and then I will press tab, and in the second bevel now I am going to choose here the weight, and then I will increase, and you can see now the bevel is applying only to the area where you have weight 1, and I will come into the profile and I am going to change this profile, and I will also increase the segments here. I will make it 5 segment, and if I change the shape like this, you can now see a negative bevel is applied by changing this shape. Not only this, you can even choose custom bevel preset here. say I can select the custom bevel preset and I can manually control this bevel value, or I can change the bevel shape like this. So I can have my own bevel shape created like this. So now you have a kind of an S shape created. So all these are the features available under bevel. Now here I will come into file, new general, and I will create a new file, and for the next modifier I have one cube here and I am going to call this as union cube, and then I will press shift A and I am going to add one UV sphere. I will press S and slightly scale it down, press numpad 1, come into the front view, GZ, and move it to the top like this, and I am going to place this and I am going to call this as union sphere. I am going to select both this, press shift D, press X, and I will move it to the side, and I am going to call this as intersect cube, and also I will call this as intersect sphere. And similarly now I will make one more copy of this, press X and move it to the side, and this one I am going to call this as difference cube, and I am going to call this as difference sphere. Now let us work on the next modifier, and for that I will select this union cube. I will come into my modifier, and in the add modifier generate, the next modifier we have here is the boolean. Now when I select the boolean modifier, the first option I am going to choose is union, and here I have to provide two objects. One is the object for which the boolean transformation is applied, and another is the object to be boolean, and here I am now going to select this union sphere. I will come over here and I will switch off this union sphere here, and now if I choose union, you can now see that this sphere and this cube are merged together. See, in this union cube is now merged with the union sphere. The second type of boolean I have is, I will select the intersect cube. Again I will come here and I will add a boolean, and this time the object I will choose is the intersect sphere, and I am going to choose the option intersect. And if I switch off this intersect sphere, you can now see the intersection of this cube and sphere can be seen here. And similarly now for the third cube I am going to add the boolean modifier, and this time I will leave it at the default difference, and I am going to select the third sphere, the difference sphere. I will switch off difference sphere, and now you can see that we have this intersection. I will come into file, new general, and now say for example I will delete this default cube, press shift A, and now I am going to add a UV sphere, and if required I will press tab, right click and subdivide it a little more, press tab, and then I will come into the modifier, and the next modifier I am going to add here is the build modifier. And when I choose this build modifier, you can now see that you have the option here, start frame 1 length set to 100. Now what happens is, this is an animation modifier, and if I play the animation, you can see that, see how the faces are built one after another. See the faces, you can see it is getting built one after another like this. So this will be very useful when you want to create some kind of object building up animations, and for this we use this build animation. Now for the next one, I will come into file, new general, I don't save this, I will select this cube, press X and delete it. I will press shift A and I am going to add this monkey. Now I will just select this monkey, press tab, select everything and choose subdivide, and I am going to subdivide it some 3 times, and then also if required I will come and right click and choose shade auto smooth. If you come over here and enable statistics, you can now see that this monkey has nearing 31,146 vertices. Now say for example you are using this model for a game, or you want to use this about 1000 copies or 2000 copies. If every copy has 31,000 vertices, then this becomes a very huge mesh. So now in this case, to reduce the number of vertices and faces and edges, we are going to use our next modifier, and the next modifier we are going to use here is the decimate. So when I click on this decimate, as of now nothing is happening, but if I come here in the ratio, it is set to 1, and right now you can see this has 31,000 vertices. If I reduce this ratio to 0.1, then immediately you can see this 31,000 vertices has been reduced to 3,121 vertices, and you can still see number of vertices have been drastically reduced. Now if required I can even come here and choose this as 0.01, and now you can see that this entire monkey now has only 330 vertices. Like if I make it 0.001, then you can see that it has now just 39 vertices, and you can see now the monkey is totally distorted. Okay, so this is very bad. So instead of 0.001 I will set it to 0.006 and see. Okay, so this appears to be somewhat fine. So without this decimate, if I switch it off, then you are able to see that I have 31,000 vertices, but when I apply this decimate, you can now see this has been reduced to 204 vertices. In this you have 3 options: collapse, unsubdivide and planar. So if I select this, right now I have set it to 0.006. Unsubdivide is another option here, and in this you have iterations. So as I increase the iterations, you can see now the vertices count is reducing. I can unsubdivide it. So when I do it 3 times, unsubdivide is the opposite of subdivision surface. So now when it becomes 5409, you can see the distortion happening. And the third option you have here is the planar, and in case of planar now the angle limit is chosen. So as I change this angle limit, if I set the angle limit to 2, you can now see it has 7,899 vertices. If I set it to 30 degree, you can now see this has only 494 vertices, and if I set this to around 45 degree, you can now see this has just 287 vertices. So now either I can use planar, unsubdivide or collapse to reduce the number of vertices in my model, and for this we use the decimate modifier. Okay, now after this I will come into file, new, general, and in the new file I am going to work on the next modifier, and for the next modifier I will delete this, I will press X and delete this default cube, press Shift A, and I am now going to add one cylinder. I will press numpad 1, come into the front view, press tab, press S, Z and scale it along the Z axis, and I will press Ctrl R and I will add some 3 loop cuts, click once and then right click to apply it. I will alt click this loop cut, select this, and I am going to press E and then S, and I am going to scale it, and I am going to create a extrusion like this. Then I will come over here and I will select the next loop cut here. I will press S and I will scale it like this. I will create some kind of a shape here, and similarly I will select the last one here, Control B, and I am going to add a bevel here, and I will just open this bevel and increase the segments here, and I am going to change this like this. So I will add some 0.66 shape, and if I press tab, will press numpad 1 and come into the front view. And now if I select this and come into the modifier, and here the next generate modifier I am going to use here is the edge split. Now when I select the edge split and come into the wireframe mode, now you can see that the default edge split is happening at 30 degrees. So if I reduce the angle to around 3 degrees, and now as of now you are not seeing much of the change here. Now say for example, I will keep it at default 30 degree only, and with this edge split apply, if I click apply now, and now if I press tab and come into the edit mode, now if I select the top portion and press L and press G, see this portion I can move it out as a separate part. See, this is now a separate part. The top ring that you are seeing here, this is now a separate part. I will select this, press L, and you can see this entire circle is another separate part. See, this is the separate part. Then I will press L and select this, press G and move it. This is a separate part. I will press L and select, I will deselect everything, press L and select it. So like this, all these sections are now divided into separate parts. So now the edge split is going to create a split or a separation in the edges which is more than a particular angle, and for this we will use the edge split modifier. Now I will come into file, new, general, and I will not going to save this, and now in our new file now for this modifier I am going to select this cube, press numpad 7, come into the top view, press tab, and I will press S, and along the Y axis I will scale it up a little, and I will just turn this a little, and yes, and along the Z axis I will scale it down a little, and I am going to create something like a box. And inside this box I will come to face selection mode. I will select this face, press I, and I will add an insert, and then I will press E and I will extrude it down, and I will again press I and create an insert like this. Say for example, this is a box packing, and inside the box we have some items inside this. Say for example, I will select this box, and for this box I am going to come into the material and I am going to add some color like this, and I will come into the texture view. So I have a box which is like this. Now inside this box, now I will press Shift A and I am going to add one more box. I will press S, Y, and I will slightly scale it like this, S, Z, and I will scale it down and make it flat like this. And for this I will add a new material and I will give it some blue color here, and then selecting this I will press GZ and place it inside this box like this. Now this is a box packing, and inside this box packing I want an opening here, and I should be able to see the inside material, and this I doesn't want it to do it in edit mode, but I want to do it in the object mode. So in this case I will come into the modifier and I am now going to add a modifier called as mask, and when I add the mask modifier, you can immediately see that my entire content has been masked. If I come into this data modifier and then if I press tab, now here I will press A to select everything. I will come into the vertex mode, press A to select everything, and then I will press Shift and I will deselect the 4 vertices over here. So I have selected everything except these 4 vertices. Then in vertex group I will create a group and I am going to call this as box, and I am going to assign this with the weight of 1. Now after this, now if I press tab and come over here, and if I come into the modifier, now in the vertex group I am now going to select the box, and when I select the box, you can now see that this portion whichever was not selected has been totally masked out. See, you can see how this has been masked. This vertex group, next to the box you have an arrow here, and this is the invert button. So if I click on this invert button, the selection will be inverted. So, now only the area which was unselected, it has been visible and all others is invisible. But if I reverse this, you can now see that all other is visible and whatever was selected has become invisible. And also I can control this with the threshold, I can move and control this with the threshold. So, with this we have completed and we have explored most of the modifiers here, and the next modifier we are going to discuss will be the mirror modifier, and we are going to work on mirror and other modifiers in our next session.